Junkyards are supposed to be the final resting place for dead cars, broken appliances, and dreams your uncle abandoned in 1997. But apparently, some junkyards across America didn't get the memo, because instead of scrap metal, they've been hiding cursed artifacts, disturbing surprises, and things that absolutely should have come with therapy sessions. Today, we're diving into 33 mind-melting discoveries pulled from real junkyards. The kind of stuff that makes you question humanity, physics, and whether you should ever wander behind abandoned cars at night. Buckle up. Actually, don't buckle up. People who buckle up usually survive. We're here for the other type of story. Let's begin. Story 1. The Coffin. Nobody ordered. A junkyard worker in Florida was sorting metal like a normal Tuesday when he uncovered something no one wants to find before lunch. A coffin. A real one. Not a Halloween prop. The best part? It rattled when they moved it, because inside were actual human bones. Not arranged neatly either. Just tossed around like someone cleaned out their attic and said, "Yeah, dump Grandpa with the old air conditioners." Police showed up, took notes, asked uncomfortable questions, and left with zero explanations. To this day, no one knows where the coffin came from, how it got buried under junk, or why someone decided to recycle a body like scrap metal. Florida, ladies and gentlemen. Story 2, the haunted hearse that whispered back in Texas. Junkyard workers found a rotting hearse that had probably transported more spirits than a bar in Las Vegas. Locals whispered, and yes, I'm using that word intentionally, that the hearse once belonged to a priest who performed exorcisms. When workers went near it, several swore they heard soft murmurs coming from the back, which is funny because the back was empty, and also dead quiet, pun aggressively intended. One worker quit on the spot. Another tried to burn sage around it, except he accidentally set fire to a pile of tires. Nobody died, ironically, but the hearse was officially labeled, "Do not touch unless possessed." Story 3, the clown car of emotional damage. There are normal junkyard discoveries, like rusty Hondas, broken lawnmowers, or dreams people abandoned when gas hit $5. And then there are discoveries that make you reconsider your entire childhood, your trust in humanity, and every clown you've ever seen. Workers at a Midwest junkyard stumbled upon a tiny circus car, the kind performers squeeze into right before they terrorize children for money. The paint was peeling in long strips like old sunburn. The wheels sagged inward like they'd given up on life, and the doors squeaked with the kind of sound you usually hear right before someone makes a terrible decision in a horror movie. But the real psychological damage wasn't the car. It was what was inside. Dozens of porcelain clown dolls, each more cracked, weathered, and unsettling than the last, packed together in a perfect circle as if they were holding some secret meeting. Their glass eyes, chipped faces, and rotting costumes all pointed toward the door, as if waiting for someone to walk in. Nobody admitted putting them there. Nobody wanted to be connected to this spiritual catastrophe. Even the bravest worker refused to go near it without backup, a flashlight, and emotional insurance. Let's be honest, if Pennywise ever formed a support group, this would be the founding chapter. You don't sleep after something like that. You just blink aggressively until sunrise. Story 4. The safe nobody should open. When a heavily rusted safe was dragged from beneath a pile of stacked cars in New Jersey, it immediately transformed a group of half-awake junkyard workers into full-time treasure hunters. It didn't matter that the safe looked like it had survived a flood, a fire, and possibly a nervous breakdown. Their curiosity switched on instantly. They attacked this safe with every tool available: hammers, crowbars, axes, an air chisel borrowed from a cousin who definitely shouldn't be trusted with power tools, and, when all else failed, pure desperation. For 3 straight hours they hammered, pried, kicked, cursed, begged, and even offered to talk it out. Nothing worked. This safe had the structural integrity of a tank and the personality of someone who refuses therapy. It simply would not open. It survived everything short of tactical explosives and divine intervention. Not a dent, not a squeak. It just sat there like, nice try. Amateurs? Eventually, they gave up and sold it to a collector. The kind of person who buys mystery boxes at auctions and pretends he doesn't hear warning signs. And what did he find inside? Nobody knows, because he refuses to tell anyone, which leaves only two possibilities. A. It contained absolutely nothing and he's too embarrassed to admit it. B. It contained something so unsettling he's now legally, spiritually, and emotionally sworn to secrecy. Either way, we will never know. And honestly, that's probably for the best. Story 5. The Prison Bus. Nobody wants a ride on some discoveries are interesting. Some are valuable, and some make you want to respectfully back away and let the universe handle whatever is happening. In a California junkyard, workers found a fully intact prison transport bus, parked as casually as a soccer mom's minivan. But this wasn't just any bus. This thing radiated the kind of emotional energy psychologists write books about. The windows were still barred. The heavy metal doors were still locked. The faded white paint looked sunburned. And the entire vehicle smelled like regret, sweat, and court-ordered silence. Inside, the cells were untouched. Metal bunks bolted down with the determination of someone who knew very well people were going to attempt stupid things. The walls were covered in scribbles, names, dates, prayers, angry sentences, and what might have been someone's last coherent thought. Rumors spread fast. Local old-timers insisted the bus was part of an infamous failed escape attempt decades ago. The kind where someone had a big plan, very little intelligence, and even less luck. Tourists eventually started trying to sneak in for selfies. Most left with blurry photos, shaky hands, and a sudden desire to obey every law ever written. The bus still sits there, still locked, still judging everyone who walks by. If vehicles had memories, this one would need therapy. Story 6. A jet engine. Just sitting there are objects you expect to see in a junkyard. Dented bumpers, broken refrigerators, old tires, the shattered hopes of 12 previous owners. But a jet engine? No one is emotionally prepared for that. Yet in Nevada, workers rounded a corner one morning and came face to face with what looked like a Boeing jet engine, casually half buried in the dirt like it was trying to retire in peace. It was enormous. A metal beast with blades big enough to slice through mid-air birds and your will to live. The thing looked like it had crash-landed during a midlife crisis, whispered, "I quit," and crawled to the junkyard to nap forever. Nobody claimed it. Nobody reported it missing. No airline stepped forward, which, if you think about it for more than 6 seconds, is deeply concerning. Airlines lose luggage. They lose passengers' sandwiches. They should not be losing multi-million-dollar jet engines. But there it sat, silent, mysterious, and definitely judging humanity. People lose keys. People lose socks. Apparently, aviation companies lose jet engines. At this point, TSA should probably give up and let everyone bring toothpaste again. Story 7. The Tunnel to Nowhere. In Texas, junkyard workers were clearing metal when the ground suddenly sagged beneath them. The kind of slow, dramatic collapse that screams, "You are not supposed to be here." After the dirt settled, a dark opening appeared. A tunnel. Long, narrow, deep, and absolutely not built for people with survival instincts. Curiosity kicked in, but sanity kicked harder. Still, they looked. The tunnel stretched deep under the junkyard, then eventually caved in like it gave up halfway through existing. No markings, no signs, no helpful "turn back now" message. It simply existed, like a bad idea nobody finished. Speculation ran wild. Was it a smuggler's tunnel? A forgotten bunker from someone convinced the world would end in 1974? A secret getaway route for someone who owed a very dangerous person a very large amount of money? Or was it simply a hole that got ambitious? Nobody investigated further, because the first rule of horror movies is, do not go inside the mysterious hole. Especially not the one you found at work, behind rusty car parts, in a place where tetanus grows freely. The tunnel is still there, still ignored, still a terrible idea. Story 8. The Suitcase. Full of absolutely not Michigan junkyard workers were sorting through scrap when they found a dusty, weather-beaten suitcase, the kind that looks innocent until someone's soundtrack music starts playing. They cracked it open and immediately wished they hadn't. Inside was a stack of black and white photographs, hundreds of them, showing strangers looking straight at the camera, not smiling, not posing, just staring, expressionless. Like they knew exactly who would find the suitcase someday. Some photos were blurry, as if someone moved the camera at the last second. Some showed faint silhouettes in the background. Some looked like the picture was taken 1 second before something terrible happened, or right after. It felt less like a family album and more like the world's least comforting side quest. Police were notified. They inspected the photos, nodded gravely, whispered among themselves, and then quietly stopped asking questions. When the authorities lose interest, that's when you really worry. The suitcase now sits in a storage room. Nobody wants to claim it. Nobody wants to touch it. Good instinct, honestly. Story 9. The doll that watched too much in Alabama. Junkyard workers were cleaning out an old sedan from the 1970s. Rusted doors, faded paint, a smell that suggested someone once stored emotional baggage in the trunk when they found her. A porcelain doll sitting in the passenger seat like it had been waiting for company. Its cracked face tilted toward the window, glass eyes staring into the distance like it knew something the rest of humanity didn't. One worker moved it to another seat, just to get it out of the way. The next morning, the doll was back in the exact same position, back in the passenger seat, head tilted the same way. Someone was definitely messing with the crew, until the day it happened when none of those pranksters were on shift. After that, the doll was no longer funny. It became an unspoken workplace rule. Do not touch the doll. Do not talk about the doll. Do not anger the doll. Eventually, someone locked it inside a storage room. A week later, the room smelled like dust and regret, but the doll stayed put. For now. Story 10. The Van with That Note. A Florida junkyard received a sun-bleached, dented van with a giant handwritten note taped to the dashboard. Do not open. Evil inside. Naturally, this only encouraged the workers. Warnings never work. Ask any horror movie character ever. So they opened the van. Inside sat a single doll. Old, dusty, slumped upright in the driver's seat like it was waiting for someone to hand it the keys. No blood, no hidden room, just the doll. Which somehow made it 10 times worse. Because if you label something evil inside, and the only thing inside is a doll, you know something went wrong before the doll got there. Story 11. The motorcycle that refused to retire. Most bikes end their lives slowly, rusting in a backyard, rotting in a garage, or being temporarily parked and then forgotten for 20 years. But this one refused to go out quietly. In a Tennessee junkyard, squeezed between a pile of trash sedans and a refrigerator graveyard, workers spotted the curve of a fuel tank under a dusty tarp. They pulled it off expecting some broken scooter from 2003. Instead, they uncovered a 1940s Harley Davidson. The chrome was dulled, the paint worn thin, but everything else shockingly intact. No missing parts, no Frankenstein repairs, no weird modifications from a guy named Kyle who drinks energy drinks for breakfast. Curious, one of the workers decided to test a theory. They dusted off the seat, wiped the tank, checked the fuel, did a few basic tweaks, and then kicked the starter. The engine roared to life almost instantly. Not like an old machine, but like something that had been waiting to wake up. The sound was deep, angry, and alive. Other workers dropped what they were doing and gathered around, staring at this resurrected monster like it had just climbed out of a time portal. Eventually, a collector showed up and bought it for a small fortune. The junkyard owner smiled, said, "Good day," and then immediately raised the price on every other useless thing on the lot, because if one forgotten relic turned into a jackpot, who knows what else might be hiding in the trash? Story 12. The cash register that paid out. One last time, Nevada junkyards aren't known for generosity. They're known for sunburn, scrap metal, and the occasional scorpion. So when a worker dragged in a heavy, ancient cash register, the kind with real keys and a drawer that slams like a guillotine, nobody thought much of it. It was rusted. It was filthy. It was probably older than most of the employees. But there's something about an old cash register that always whispers, "What if?" So they decided to crack it open. The drawer wouldn't budge. The lock had fused with time. So they did what junkyard people do best. They brought tools. After some hammering, prying, and a few creative words in multiple languages, the drawer finally gave up and slid open with a metallic groan. Inside, instead of dust and disappointment, they found stacks of old bills and coins, all neatly piled, like someone closed it one day, then never came back. The total value? Just over $3,000. Not enough to retire, sure, but enough to make everybody suddenly very interested in every old safe, register, and locked box on the property. For the worker who opened it, this became the best day of my career, which is sweet, and also a little depressing. Story 13. The car that had 100,000 reasons to keep quiet. There are two types of junkyard cars, the ones that die with dignity, the ones that die with secrets. In Arizona, a tired old sedan arrived looking like every other vehicle destined for permanent retirement. Dull paint, dented doors, a smell that suggested someone once tried to store cheap fast food and emotional trauma inside. One worker started stripping it for usable parts. When he removed one of the interior door panels, something caught his eye, a small bundle wrapped in old plastic. He sliced it open, and out spilled cash, lots of it. Hidden inside the doors were carefully packed bundles of money, stuffed deep into the frame. By the time the workers finished digging, counting, and recounting, the total was over $100,000. The questions came fast. Was this drug money? A robbery stash? A paranoid hoarder's secret emergency fund? Police got involved. They took notes, asked boring official questions, and treated the money like a possible crime scene, instead of the miracle it felt like. The biggest mystery? Nobody had reported this car missing. Nobody asked about the money. Nobody came forward to claim anything. Someone hid a small fortune inside a junk car, and then either forgot, disappeared, or decided, you know what? Keep it. If that doesn't sum up human chaos, nothing does. Story 14. The diamond buried in rubber. In Kentucky, a mechanic was sorting through a tower of old tires, the kind that threatened to avalanche and bury you alive in Goodyear regrets, when something small and shiny blinked at him from between the rubber. At first, he thought it was just a piece of glass, or a bottle cap, or some other trash object that has no business trying to look important. But when he pulled it out, wiped the dust, and turned it under the light, he realized he was holding a ring, not a cheap ring, not costume jewelry. A diamond ring. He took it to get appraised, probably expecting the classic line, "Sentimental value only, sir." Instead, the appraiser's eyes widened. This wasn't a regular engagement ring. This was a serious rock. The diamond alone was worth a small house. The total value? Around $330,000, which raises the obvious question, how does a ring worth more than most people's cars end up jammed inside a pile of junk tires? Possible explanations. Someone panicked and hid it, then forgot where. Someone threw it away during a dramatic breakup and really committed to the moment. Or fate just has a twisted sense of humor. Either way, that mechanic will never look at junk piles the same way again. Story 15. The arcade time capsule. Most junkyards are noisy, dirty, and full of things that once worked but don't anymore. But one junkyard in New York discovered something better than gold, money, or rare cars. Nostalgia. Behind the main scrap area, attached to the yard, was an old locked warehouse that the current owner barely paid attention to. One day, curiosity, and maybe boredom, One, and they forced the door open. Inside, they found rows of classic arcade machines. We're talking 1980s and early 90s legends. Neon marquees, joystick cabinets, machines covered in dust, but still standing like soldiers, waiting for one last quarter. Names faded, screens dark, coins still trapped inside their bellies. Someone had turned this space into an arcade graveyard, and then just walked away. They plugged a few in, half as a joke, and to their shock, some of them powered on. Flickering screens, 8-bit startup sounds, high scores from another decade. It wasn't just a collection, it was a time capsule. Word got out, collectors arrived, nerds wept. People with more money than self-control started buying machines for thousands of dollars each. Whoever abandoned them lost a fortune. Whoever found them got to cash in on childhood. Story 16. The not-quite UFO that still caused problems. In New Mexico, where UFO stories practically grow on trees, a junkyard owner discovered something that looked like it fell straight out of a conspiracy video. Buried in the back was a metal saucer-shaped object, round, dented, and unmistakably flying saucer-ish. It looked like it had crash-landed, rolled twice, then given up. Word spread fast. Neighbors whispered. Someone's cousin's friend insisted it was definitely military. One guy showed up with night vision goggles at noon. Before long, UFO enthusiasts were circling like vultures. They took photos, measured angles, tapped it like that would reveal alien secrets. Eventually, the truth came out. It wasn't a real UFO. It was an old homemade replica, built decades ago as a promotional piece or a movie prop for some low-budget film. Did that kill the theories? Of course not. True believers simply upgraded their story. Okay, yes, maybe it's not the original UFO, but what if it was built based on a real crash the government is hiding? And just like that, the junkyard went from scrap pile to unofficial alien research site. Story 17. The movie car that rolled out of existence. In a forgotten junkyard corner in California, workers stumbled on what initially looked like a destroyed stunt car. Smashed frame, exaggerated body, and styling too dramatic for real life. On closer inspection, it became clear this wasn't just a car. This was a movie car. Over time, rumors linked it to a famous superhero film. Think capes, villains, and a certain vigilante who likes bats and grim monologues. The vehicle had clearly been abused, rammed, flipped, weather damaged, then abandoned like a retired stuntman. Nobody called back. No clear paperwork, no studio tag, nothing official. Just whispers from people who claimed, "I swear I saw this in a scene once." When collectors caught wind of it, everything changed. What was once just another wreck became a grail item. Experts inspected the frame, cross-checked details, compared screenshots from the movie. Conclusion? Highly likely legit. Someone, somewhere, lost track of a movie prop worth a fortune. And it ended up sunburning in a junkyard, next to old minivans and failed family road trip vehicles. Hollywood, ladies and gentlemen, where the props are treated about as well as the actors. Story 18. The train car that retired in the wrong neighborhood. You expect to see a lot of strange vehicles in an Oregon junkyard, but an entire train car wasn't one of them. Yet there it was, full-sized, weather-beaten, covered in layers of graffiti that ranged from impressive art to emotional breakdown. Wedged between piles of scrap and forgotten trucks, the train car looked like it took a wrong turn somewhere and decided, "Fine, I live here now." Nobody could explain how it got in there without anyone noticing. Train cars are huge. They don't exactly sneak. There were no clear tracks leading in, no paperwork, no obvious history, just a retired giant sitting in a graveyard of smaller machines. Inside, the seats were ripped, windows broken, and old flyers still stuck to walls. Whatever route it used to run was long dead, but the car itself remained like the final confused guest at a party that ended 30 years ago. The junkyard owner considered scrapping it, then realized people kept coming just to take photos with it, so he turned it into an accidental tourist attraction instead. Story 19. The plane that came with a missing person. Story attached. When you see airplane wreckage in a junkyard in Arizona, you assume it's just another retired piece of metal, a small private plane that outlived its usefulness. But this particular wreck carried something heavier than dents and dust, a name. The workers noticed some remaining ID markings on the plane's body and reported them. When authorities ran the registration, they discovered the plane belonged to a pilot who had gone missing years earlier. No dramatic explosion, no widely covered crash, just vanished. Yet here was the plane's skeleton, sunburned and quietly decaying among old cars and scrap metal. What happened between the plane's disappearance and its arrival at the junkyard? No one could give a clear answer. Was it salvaged quietly? Sold under the table? Dragged around until it ended up where nobody asked questions? All anyone knows is the plane's story ended in a junkyard. The pilot's story didn't get the same closure. Story 20. The carnival ride that should have stayed closed. Pennsylvania junkyards aren't exactly known for whimsy, but this one had something unusual towering over the metal heaps. The skeletal remains of an old carnival ride. Rusty beams, bent supports, faded paint in what used to be cheerful colors, now closer to haunted hospital shades. Legend had it the ride wasn't just closed, it was shut down after a string of accidents. Nothing officially confirmed, of course, just enough vague stories to make people very sure they didn't want to sit in one of its seats. Even as a dead structure, it looked wrong. Like it was still waiting for power, still waiting for one more spin. Workers swore that on quiet nights when the wind was low, the old metal creaked, not like a random shift of weight, but like a slow, deliberate motion. Nobody believed in ghosts, but nobody volunteered to dismantle it either. So there it stands, a monument to bad engineering, injured pride, and the exact reason why some people refuse to ride anything that folds up onto a truck. Story 21. The van with the taxidermy bear. Some junkyard discoveries make you stop and think. This one makes you stop, think, reconsider your life decisions, and walk away before something traumatizes you permanently. In a Montana junkyard sitting in the far back where the sun fades everything into horror movie gray, workers stumbled upon an old white van. Nothing strange about that. Junkyards are basically van cemeteries. But when they opened the back doors, expecting trash, spiders, or the remains of someone's failed moving day, they instead found a full-size taxidermy bear. Not a rug, not a mount. A whole bear, sitting upright, paws in its lap positioned like it was deep in meditation. The glass eyes stared straight ahead in a calm, unsettling manner, as if the bear was either contemplating life or plotting revenge against whoever last slammed that door. Questions filled the air quickly. Who puts a preserved bear in the back of a van? Why was it abandoned? Why was it sitting so politely? Was this some bizarre form of carpooling gone terribly wrong? No answers, no hints, no witnesses, just a bear. Patiently waiting, still, silent, judging. The junkyard workers named him Barry. Nobody touches Barry. Nobody moves Barry. Barry stays exactly where Barry wants to stay, because even dead, he looks like he could win a fight. Story 22. If a horror movie director wanted a prop that screams bad things await, this would be the audition winner. In an Arizona junkyard, workers found a wooden crate with giant red letters painted across the front. Do not open. Naturally, human curiosity shot through the roof. So they opened it. Inside was another box, smaller, also sealed, also labeled, Do not open. The workers looked at each other. Someone shrugged. Someone else whispered, Maybe don't? But it was too late. Curiosity had already taken control. They pried open the second box. And inside was a third box. At this point, it was no longer a mystery. It was a personal attack. Box number 3 was wrapped in old rope, taped shut like someone really wanted to stop whatever was inside from escaping. and once again written across the top, "Do not open." That's when the workers collectively decided, yeah, no, we're not doing this, because boxes inside boxes inside boxes don't end in treasure. They end in possession, curses pretending to be treasure, or IRS paperwork. They resealed the boxes, labeled it "Do Not Touch," and stuck it in the warehouse. Nobody has opened the last box. Nobody wants to. Nobody ever will. Because some questions aren't worth the nightmares. Story 23. The Mummified Cat in the Dashboard. Louisiana junkyards see weird things daily. Snakes, gators, ex-girlfriend revenge scratches, but nothing prepared workers for what they found inside an old, decaying classic car. The radio was missing, the seats were shredded, the glove compartment was jammed, and something in the dashboard smelled like history and sadness. They popped open the panel and stared straight into the face of a mummified cat, perfectly preserved by heat and time, wedged so deeply into the wiring that it looked like it had been living there when the pyramids were built. One worker fainted. Another whispered, "Bro?" "Nope." Another asked very sincerely, "Do we need to call someone for this?" No one touched it after that. The cat stayed exactly where it had chosen to die, a permanent furry overseer of the car's final resting place. The junkyard manager later put a sign on the car, "Museum item, do not remove," which is junkyard language for, "We don't get paid enough for this." Story 24. The Fire Truck That Came Back. Strong, New York. Junkyards usually house dead machines, silent, drained, rotting. But one day workers discovered something with more history than everything else combined. A fully intact old fire truck, faded red paint, but solid bones, sitting proudly among the broken cars like a retired hero who refused to fall apart. The thing had character, rusted ladders, dented panels, and equipment mounts still attached. It practically screamed, "I saved lives when your grandma was in pigtails." Someone bought it, restored it, polished every inch, and eventually put it on display in a local museum. Visitors now admire it. Children climb inside and families take photos, completely unaware that this majestic piece of history spent years sleeping between crushed minivans and piles of microwaves. The fire truck went from scrap metal to national treasure faster than most people glow up on Instagram. Story 25. The trunk with a secret and no key. Tennessee junkyard workers came across a heavy metal trunk covered in rust and mystery. No handles, no keyhole, no writing. Just a steel box that looked like it had hosted several generations of terrible secrets. Workers tried prying it open, didn't budge. They tried hammers. Nope. Tried chisels. Denied. One guy even attempted motivational talking. Still nothing. Eventually, they hauled it to a specialist who spent hours using specialized tools, drills, cutters, and possibly sorcery. The trunk finally cracked open with a metallic gasp. What was inside? Nobody knows, because the specialist refused to disclose the contents. Not even a hint, not even a subtle eyebrow raise. When a professional breaks open a sealed trunk from the underworld and chooses silence, you don't push further. Either it was something worthless or something that made him reconsider every life choice. Story 26. The Ice Cream Truck That Still Played. Music Florida junkyards are basically sauna-like danger zones full of reptiles and regret. But even they weren't prepared for this one. An old ice cream truck covered in graffiti and missing half its parts was pushed into the yard like any other dead vehicle. Except this one wasn't entirely dead. On certain windy days, when air passed through the broken speaker system just right, the truck emitted a faint, eerie music box version of its old ice cream jingle. Not cheerful, not nostalgic, not something kids would run toward. More like, if a clown wanted to lure you into the woods, this is the song he'd use. People walking by would hear it softly, echo through the metal rows. Ting, ting, ting. Like a ghost offering frozen treats. No one wants to buy it. No one wants to scrap it. No one wants to hear the song after dark. So it sits there, haunted by childhood memories nobody asked for. Story 27. The Billboard from a Lost Era. Georgia junkyard workers stumbled across a giant metal billboard buried deep in the yard, leaning against old parts like it had been dropped by a time traveler with poor aim. The sign advertised a business that had closed more than 50 years ago, a store no one remembered, a brand no one recognized, prices no one believed. The paint was faded, but still legible. The smiling cartoon mascot looked too happy for someone who'd been abandoned for half a century. People lined up to take pictures with it. Some felt nostalgic for an era they weren't even alive for. Others tried Googling the store and got zero results. A business erased from history, but its billboard somehow survived. A literal ghost advertisement. Story 28. The Gas Mask Army. In a Washington junkyard, someone unearthed a large wooden crate that rattled when moved. Not a good sign. They cracked it open expecting spare parts, old tools, or something equally boring. Instead, they found dozens of pristine vintage military gas masks, neatly stacked in perfect condition, still sealed in their original packaging. It looked like someone prepared for chemical warfare, changed their mind, and then yeeted the whole box into a junkyard like not dealing with this. Collectors came running. Survivalists drooled. One guy asked if he could buy them all for decorating his bunker. Nobody knows where the masks came from, or why so many were dumped, or who paid for all that equipment just to abandon it. But they're worth a lot, which means the junkyard owner suddenly became a very, very happy man. Story 29. The Model T that refused to rot. A Missouri junkyard crew thought they'd seen it all, until they found a perfectly preserved Ford Model T from the 1920s sitting in the corner, like it had been time-traveled straight from history class. Dust covered it, sure, but the structure, solid. Interior, shockingly intact. Engine, probably more reliable than half the modern cars people complain about today. Collectors swarmed like seagulls spotting fries. Vintage lovers gasped. Even the junkyard workers treated it with reverence, as if breathing too hard might break it. The car eventually sold for a fortune, proving once again that while modern cars depreciate faster than relationships, classics age like royalty. Story 30. The Chained Chest of Nevada. Nothing says bad idea like a mysterious metal chest wrapped in heavy chains. Yet there it was, sitting under piles of discarded scrap in a Nevada junkyard. Thick chains, old locks, metal plates reinforced across the seams. The whole thing looked like it belonged in a pirate movie or a demon-summoning ritual. Workers stared at it. Nobody dared touch it. Nobody dared shake it. Nobody even wanted to stand near it too long, because when something is chained up that tightly, someone clearly wanted whatever was inside to stay there, forever. They left it alone, untouched, unopened, unquestioned. Some mysteries aren't worth dying for. Or worse, unleashing. Story 31. NASA's Lost Test Capsule. You expect to find a lot of bizarre objects in an Alabama junkyard, abandoned trucks, forgotten appliances, crushed dreams, but nobody expected to find a giant metal object shaped like it fell straight out of a science museum. Hidden behind a pile of wrecked trailers was a rusted NASA test capsule, sitting there like it had stopped by for retirement and never left. It was weather-beaten, dented, and sun-scorched, with markings barely visible under decades of grime. Workers circled it like confused archaeologists who weren't sure whether they'd found something valuable or something radioactive. Local kids climbed on it. Old men touched it like it was a sacred relic. UFO fans took pictures and whispered that it definitely wasn't human-made, even though NASA logos were literally printed on the side. When reporters called NASA and asked whether this capsule was missing, NASA responded with the classic government answer, "We'll investigate." Translation, "We will absolutely not investigate." To this day, nobody knows how a piece of space history ended up abandoned among broken dishwashers and rusted pickup trucks. Did someone steal it? Did NASA misplace it? Was it part of a top-secret experiment someone wanted to quietly forget? All we know is the capsule is still there, a metal monument to science, mismanagement, and the universe's weird sense of humor. Story 32. The Tank with Live Ammunition. A California junkyard once accidentally hosted one of the scariest and most impressive guest vehicles in history. An actual military tank, parked casually among sedans like it was waiting for an oil change. Nobody knew who dropped it off. Nobody signed paperwork. It just appeared one morning like the world's most intimidating, lost and found item. Workers examined it carefully, very carefully, and realized something that made everyone take 5 giant steps back. The tank still had live ammunition inside, not decorative shells, not empty casings, real, functioning, press the wrong button and say goodbye to the county ammunition. Police were called, then the bomb squad, then some guy from the military who looked like he hadn't slept since the Cold War. After an intense inspection process, the tank was finally secured and hauled away, leaving the junkyard workers with nothing but adrenaline, trauma, and the shared experience of having stood too close to a weapon of mass destruction while wearing steel-toe boots and $12 gloves. How do you lose a tank? How do you forget to unload its ammunition? How do you drop it off at a junkyard like it's a microwave? Humanity may never know. Story 33. The Lost Door of James Dean's Cursed Car. California junkyards have seen everything from celebrity cars to vehicles that look like someone drove them through 5 dimensions. But this discovery shocked even the veterans. Buried under decades of scrap metal was a dented, fading car door panel that didn't look special at first glance. But when a collector spotted it, his eyes widened like he had just found a winning lottery ticket. Because this wasn't just any door. This was a missing piece of James Dean's legendary Porsche 550 Spyder, the car involved in his fatal accident, the one rumored to be cursed, the one that mysteriously disappeared after being transported across the country. And now, randomly, its passenger side door was found sitting silently in a junkyard, like it took a detour through history and got tired halfway. The door was authenticated. The story made headlines. Collectors fought over it like gladiators. Some people said the curse lived on. Others said it was just superstition. But the junkyard workers, they didn't care about curses. They just wanted the cursed door off their property before something weird started happening. And honestly, that was the smartest decision anyone made. And there you have it, 33 of the strangest, creepiest, most why does this exist discoveries ever pulled out of American junkyards. Most people think junkyards are boring heaps of metal and forgotten memories. But clearly, they're more like open-world side quests, each containing a rare combination of curses, mysteries, lost fortunes, and things that absolutely should have remained buried. From clown dolls arranged like a demonic book club, to tanks loaded with live ammunition, to NASA losing a capsule like it was a pair of socks. One thing is very clear. Junkyards are less trash disposal and more reality glitch zones. If you enjoyed this deep dive into chaos, confusion, and questionable decision-making, make sure to hit that like button so the YouTube algorithm knows you enjoy suffering for entertainment. And subscribe. Because out of all the junk in the world, these stories are just the beginning. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one. Assuming none of these items follow me home.